We Talk Talent Series Season 4, where we invite the most prominent HR leadership voices to share their insights and experiences on and around the current HR ecosystem. Joining us today is Mino Thomas. A quick introduction about Mino Thomas before we start. He is a senior talent acquisition leader with over 18 plus years of experience in managing and setting up global teams, recruitment processes, and systems for blue chip IT organizations. Mino is a hands on recruitment leader with excellent sourcing and engagement skills. He has led technology and sales hiring for North Americas, Europe, the UK, APAC, India, and Middle East regions. For his exceptional work in the field of HR, he has been awarded the Top 101 HR Tech Minds Award in 2019. With this, a very warm welcome, Mino. It is indeed a delight to have you with us today.
Delight's all mine, Manan. Thank you for having me.
So I'm sure we are all looking forward to an interesting discussion. So let me just set the context for this conversation real quick. My first question to you would be, how is your industry tackling the changes that the workplace has gone through over the past couple of years? If you could just share a brief overview with us.
Sure. It's been a very interesting last few years, right? And it's interesting because of multiple reasons. One is we have come out from a phase of COVID and the pre-COVID, the post-COVID, and how a workplace strategy informs you in terms of how you really render experiences, right? Earlier it was like everybody would turn into office, and then right after COVID, it was more like everybody is virtual and everybody is remote, and then slowly the whole hybrid. To some companies really asking for people to come back, like the way it was pre-COVID. But workplace in itself, because of all these things, has changed much, right? And when I say workplace, it means your real estate, the way you would really collaborate, your strategies around where you would put your offices as against where you would not, right? Would you create pods where people could come and collaborate and work, or are you still open in terms of where people are and let them work, right? So there's a lot of study around that, and that's transforming a lot. The other element that's been highly transformational of sort is over the last many years, we have been also starting to have a lot of Gen Zs enter the workforce, right? And you start to see their preferences are a little different as against the millennials, and definitely as against the baby boomers, right? In terms of just what and how things click, right? Every company or every enterprise, as they look at where they are at the moment, they're looking at, is their workplace welcoming enough for the new set of generational talent that's coming in? And is their workplace ready enough for a hybrid setup where people who were earlier comfortable coming every day may have to come fewer days, and people who are not comfortable coming to office still needs to come in, right? So how do you entice the generational diversity, and how do you entice the pre-COVID and the post-COVID to really merge? Every company is doing things very differently, and everyone is, I would say, still in a phase of, I would say they were experimenting until some time back, and now they are like moving to a phase of knowing, okay, maybe this thing works, that works. But that's where I think all of us are.
Thank you for that, Mino. So let me just steer our conversations toward that. What are your employee engagement strategies, especially when we talk about the current work where hybrid and remote setup is at the peak?
We at Adobe, we believe in one very simple thing. If you have something that you are offering to your employees, is there a high degree of consumption for that, right? When we look at HR overall, we tend to do a lot of things, but not everything is consumed. And when I say consumed, it's not like, something that everybody would be happy to have, right? HR generally goes on to tick a lot of boxes saying, I've got 10 things that I can do. Let me do all the 10, right? What we do particularly is choose those things that really matter to the employees. And hence there is a higher degree of consumption, higher degree of adoption, and higher degree of impact that comes from that, right? So for example, is there a way that we could engage with a particular segment of our population, right? And is there a particular tool that we could use to engage with them more effectively, right? Is there a tool that could give us certain statistics around what is clicking and what is not clicking, right? And just in terms of the way we communicate and what we communicate, right? Interestingly, when we look at all these tools and all the analysis that comes out, you get a very good sense of where is your population sitting and how are they sitting, right? And what could you do to really propel them from where they are to the next level that they could go? Communication strategies for us post-COVID has been largely around how do you look at setting the mood, right? How do you ensure that the message is very subtly received, but very clearly received, right? How do you toe the line in between over-communicating and communicating right? How do you toe the line in terms of helping people to be okay with virtual, okay with in-house, and balancing that very well, right? What are your policies like? How do you want to define your work from home, right? For example, when we establish work from home, we're one of those first companies to go ahead and say, we're going to give you an X amount of money, a dollar amount, to set your office at home, right? So no one really feels that burn in terms of, I can't afford this, I can't do this, I can't have a recliner at my place, I can't have a pushback table to move up, right? So we were like very clear in terms of we would do enough to help you set up your office at your home, right? We would do enough also to help you in terms of when you get back to work, right? To help you be mentally at peace, like, the place is well sanitized, the place is perfect. The work ergonomics is so clear that, you don't feel threatened or you don't feel otherwise, right? When we came out of COVID, I think now largely things have settled down, right? Especially in countries like India, it seems very much settled down. But again, continuing on that, like, not dropping the ball, but continuing around that. So when you look at everything, right, from your policies to your communication strategies, to the way you engage, to the way you keep your heart around just taking care of employees, right? It matters a lot. At Adobe, we don't call ourselves HR, we call ourselves employee experience, right? And so for us, a lot of times, very clearly, employee experience sits on the throne and not on the scaffolds, right? So everything that we do goes back to that litmus test of, like I started off, will it be consumed? Is that good enough for our employees? And what's the kind of impact that would drive in terms of, if they were to consume, if they were to adopt it, if that helps. Yeah.
Thank you, Mino, for that. That was indeed very insightful. So now let's just move on to the next question. I wouldn't want to disrupt, the flow of our conversation. Can you shed some light on your employer branding strategy and how it has evolved over the past few years?
And employer branding is a very situational thing, right? And why do I call it situational? Like, there's a passage of time and there is an opportune time, right? When Adobe came into India, there was a lot of energy around, oh wow, I mean, everybody wants to work for that. We were one of those sole companies which started off in India, which was like, one of those big brands, and everybody wanted to work. Everybody would look at the building of Adobe and say, hey, wow, I mean, the building that we built in Noida when there were no other companies around in Noida is like, people, when they passed that, it used to be like a legendary thing. They would look left and say, a lot of my recruiters that I hired, they were like, I've spent 8 years passing this building thinking, how can I get into this company, right? And now that I'm working in this company, it's like a aha moment for me, right? And but then over a period of time, you have a lot of other MNCs like us come in, right? There's more option for talent. There are companies that do great. There are companies that do okay. But then you get into a point of how do you really keep yourself relevant to top talent, right? Um, one thing that I've learned over my 20 years of working is the market will soften, the market will become like the war of Panipat, right? Though it's always going to have those tussles, but the search for top tech talent, right? Or let me make it more broader. The search for top talent is always going to be high, right? Even in a time when no one is hiring, everyone is still scouting, right? Everyone is still reaching out to that person saying, hey, is Manan the best of the breed in terms of somebody who I want to reach out to, right? That's definitely happening, right? So in a market like that, which is highly competitive, where there are lots of product companies, right? We might sit at a point where, it's easier for us to hire from the other companies, but when we look at product companies in itself, it's very little to choose between these companies, right? How do you stay relevant to your talent, right? So what we do is, the first thing is we do a very clear brand audit. So where we talk to our employees within, we talk to our employees, our people who were a part of the interview, right? We sample them. We look at folks who declined our offers, right? And we look at folks that we would love to talk to, but we are still struggling to talk to, right, on the outside. And we go ahead to understand a few things around what is their understanding of Adobe, right? What do you think clicks with Adobe and them, right? What are things that they would definitely love to see at Adobe, which they don't, right? And through those basic questionnaires and basic things that we do, you get a clear sense of, hey, how's the market really estimating you at the moment, right? And it's a very broad cross section of your own employees, your folks that went through your interviewing process, folks that would have written something on Glassdoor or something on other channels where they talk about something, and folks who we want to reach out to and we can't, right? So we look very carefully at where is our brand. We also have other tools like LinkedIn and Findems and other tools which gives us Glassdoor, which gives us consistent data in terms of how is our brand getting perceived on the outside, right? Is our score at a 4.6 still, or has it dipped to a 4.5? What does it mean in terms of a fine point? Are we still way ahead of, say, our competitors, or are we at par with them? Through the brand audit, we then create 4 stories, right? And these stories are stories that tell about Adobe, right? A story that connects. Like when I speak with Manan, I know for a fact that Manan and I would connect on something, right? How do I weave my Adobe story in a manner that it connects with you and it lands with you, right? A story that engages, right? A story that connects need not engage. It's a very contradictory thing, but we have realized that there are stories that connect and there are stories that engage, right? How do I narrate a story that engages with you? Now, for that, what we do is we use certain tools to understand what excites you. Are you excited by numbers? Are you excited by creative stories? Are you excited by graphics? Are you excited by CSR? Right? Are you excited with something around tech? Right? And we would then weave our stories based on what excites you. Right? We would have a story that explains. A lot of times we have seen when there is no transparency, the chance for you to really make a move is pretty shallow, right? If you know exactly what you're getting into, right? You're well poised to make a decision in terms of, do I want to pick that up? Do I not want to pick that up? So hence the story that explains is a more detailed storyline where we talk about, hey, once you land doing this, what you're ultimately going to be doing, right? And what does that mean in terms of just the impact, right? So a story that connects, a story that engages, a story that explains, and a story that sells, the last one. A lot of times your story that sells is not the story that explains, it's not the story that connects, and not the story that engages, right? I love this line, which is, no one wants to be sold to, but everyone wants to buy, right? So Manan, you don't want to be sold to, right? And if you believe like the other person is really selling something, right? It's really kind of, getting you onto the hooks and tender hooks and pulling you over, you'll never buy that, right? But you still want to buy, right? So everyone wants to buy, but nobody wants to be sold to. So how are you able to narrate your stories based on the segment of crowd that you're dealing with, based on when should you drop the right story? How do you strategize in terms of your operations around it? What mediums do you use, right? When we talk about branding, a few things that's very sacrosanct is the medium you use. Is it Threads? Is it TikTok? Is it Insta? Is it Facebook? I mean, is it LinkedIn? What's the medium you use? And what's your content? And your content is typically those 4 content that I spoke about, right? How are you able to use those very effectively to make your story go? What we then do is look at when we do these different strategies, how does it inform our capability to convert a particular TAM, a total addressable market, into converts into joiners, or maybe let them join our community around CRM. We use a CRM where we bring them on. We have talent communities where we get people enrolled even without a rec or even without a position, right? Let them all come on board, let them talk to each other, let them be engaged with us. So we look at those conversions and see how that really takes us forward. But it's been an interesting journey, and I mean, there's a lot of slices and dices to it in terms of just not the medium. How do we choose a medium based on your generation that you come from? How do we choose our content based on where you sit and what might excite you, right? And we have seen very clearly that when you build a very strong brand theater, when you have a very strong employee value proposition and an employer value proposition, it really brings a lot of goodness to certain matrices, right? Like your metric in terms of declines, you have more accepts than declines. Your metric in terms of just productivity, right? Your metric in terms of time to fill, your metric in terms of quality of hire, right? So we find a lot of these things pushing north and pushing well, right? So if as an enterprise, you're still thinking about what is brand and what's the importance of building a brand and staying relevant, I wouldn't be off my mark. If you do not have a team doing that, you are way off the mark, right? And if you have a team doing that, continue investing in it, because it's only going to get more and more busier, right? And more complex as we move forward. So hence creating your people, structure, systems, process, and your OKRs or your KPIs around it is of paramount importance.
Thank you for that very comprehensive and detailed answer, Mino. So let's just quickly move on to a very industry-specific question. So according to your industry demands, what are the type of skill shortages that you are facing that are causing the talent war?
Yeah, interesting question. And if you would ask me this question maybe 8 months back, I would have given you a different answer. You're asking me right now, and hence it's a different answer. Maybe if you ask me after 2 quarters, it might change, right? So, and that's a level of vagaries that we have in terms of just the market, right? And how dynamic the market is. I mean, I was going through a study that said between 2015 and 2023, the skills have changed 25%, right? And we're expecting between 2023 and 2030 for the skills to change another 65%. right? Which means there are two things. One is vectorally, you're moving towards change is the only constant. But the other subtle thing, and I think that's the more neglected thing, is the magnitude of change, right? When we say out of every 100, 65 skills are going to tip over or change or flip, I mean, it's a very complex scenario, right? In terms of just where you are. I mean, every company at the moment is really looking at AI, is looking at machine learning, is looking at generative AI, is looking at video, is looking at someone's ability to look at data and look at data very differently, right? You know, we're going to move into a phase where you might not need a coder, but you would definitely need a modular. You may not need a journalist, but you would need an editor, right? Because you would get codes written at a drop of a hat using machine learning, right? But where it really comes is in terms of who is the one that really modules it up in a manner that it makes sense to or contextualizes to a particular product or a customer, right? And that is where your skills are going to move a lot into, right? I closely track in terms of how our AI ML skills are getting asked for, right? And we have seen 80% rise in those skills in terms of just the ask of it, right? What we also look at is a lot of people join us who typically don't say they are AI, but they have a skill that AI ML has. For example, they may be good at Python, they might be good at something else from that phase. And the last time when I looked at data, over the last 3 years, the people that we brought in has got some, at least 50% of them have got some skills around AI, right? But we are slowly moving into a phase where it's not about your C++ or your Java that really matters, but slowly AI and ML is going to be a space that is going to get really, really busy. The other thing that we realize in India and other countries also is that a lot of people say they are AI ML, but they aren't AI ML. So the degree of AI and ML capabilities and powers that we really look at is much more complex than what people really say they have, right? Because ultimately you're going to be in a team that's going to create things like Firefly, right? The ability of that generative AI to really look at and create images that are like absolutely so real, right? And so complex and so beautiful and so wonderful. It really needs a great sense of understanding of image processing. It needs a great sense of understanding of those nitty-gritties as well, right? And so hence the skills are moving towards that. And the other element is, I think a lot of people really play down their soft skills. And when I say soft skills, it's not about how you speak, but your ability to collaborate, right? I still remember I used to be a part of an enterprise earlier, and we were like, what's the best way to identify somebody who can collaborate, right? If we were hiring a person off campus, right? We said, let's look at the projects that a person has done during campus. And if a CS student has done a project which involves working with a mech department, right? You clearly see that the person had that flavor of, I want to go out of my comfort zone. I want to work with somebody from not a CS labs, from a mech lab and create something beautiful, right? Or from a mech student who says, I'm doing this, but I want to make a robotic eye and I want to work very closely with, say, the CS department or with civil even, right? But just that whole thing of, how they are able to work interfunctionally, that soft skill of collaboration, that soft skill of understanding the need of a customer and even articulating, right? I would strongly suggest, if as a coder you're listening to this and you believe how you form your sentences or how you form an opinion or how you understand the other person is not important, I would say start asking those questions to ourselves in terms of, I think it's important. And in a world that's so connected, our ability to articulate a point of view that transcends cultures and boundaries becomes even more important, right? Because otherwise, all things AI, a lot of things will happen through AI and will happen from AI.
That was very neatly described, Mino, and I'm sure our audiences will resonate with your thoughts. Thank you for sharing such wonderful insights. It was an absolute delight to listen to your thoughts and experiences. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you, Manu. The pleasure was mine. Thank you for having me.
Now, to quickly address our viewers, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another engaging episode of the We Talk Talent series. Till then, keep watching and keep talking.